If this happens to you without a cage, you're toast. Today on Xtreme 4x4, Ian and Jessi finish up the roll cage and Ranger Resurrection. Plus, be ready to get hammered at one of the toughest trails in the West.
Welcome to Xtreme 4x4 and part 2 of our Ranger Resurrection. We picked up this Ford Ranger at a junkyard for $500 and plan on turning it into a Baja-influenced truck.
I know it's an ambitious project, and we were inspired by your emails. You guys wanted hardcore? Well, you don't get any more hardcore than this.
If you remember last time, we stripped and cut out the unusable frame pieces, added extended cab side panels in order to lengthen the wheelbase and allow us to build functional scoops for our rear-mounted radiator.
We then stripped the interior and planned out our roll cage, then bent up some beefy 1 5/8 drawn over mandrel tubing and tacked our rear hoop in place on the floor plates. This week, we'll finish up the cage inside the cab, start working on the new frame rails, and mock some fiberglass panels into place.
But first, we gotta take the windshield out.
Yep.
With this rear main hoop in place, I can go ahead and start measuring for the front hoop. I'm gonna start with the roof bars, and then I can go ahead and start measuring for the down bars. I'm just gonna take an estimate here, but if I cut them extra long, then you can't ever really go wrong. This is about 4 foot, so I'll cut it at about 50-some inches. Next, I'll hit the bender. Notch them to fit, and now they are ready to weld. TIG welding is an option, and with some steel types, it's an absolute necessity. So if you're building a roll cage for a specific sanctioning body, you're going to want to consult the rule books for cage requirements.
2 straight from the notcher.
Thank you. And with these 2 pieces, I'm going to show you the difference between TIG welding and MIG welding. With the metal prepped, I can begin to weld. A TIG welder uses a tungsten electrode to create an arc that I will add fill rod to as I weld. I can control the heat of the weld by using a foot pedal. A MIG welder feeds a filler wire from inside the machine. This is electrified and causes an arc on the metal. The drawback to this welder is that the heat is constant. Now, as you can see, the MIG creates a lot of spatter. See those little weld berries in there? But it's a lot easier and a lot faster to use. Whereas the TIG requires a lot more skill, but it's a lot stronger.
Nice welds.
Thank you.
There you go. Now, a lot of people get intimidated about the different welding processes, but one thing teaching high school shop for many years has taught me, with a little bit of practice, anybody can do it. For this cage, we're going to use the MIG welder because it allows us easier access in tight places. Once the roof bar is in place, it's just a process of measure, cut, notch, and so on.
All right, we're ready to put in our windshield down bars, because if you remember, we're going to be using Lexan glass, which requires additional strength in the center here. So what I'm going to do is mark center line on both the dash bar and the roof bar as soon as Ian moves this clamp for me.
Oh, yeah, I can do that. Then, once Jessi gets those center lines marked, we'll stretch this piece of string in between the 2 of them, and that'll give us reference points for the bars.
Thank you. With the cage finally taking shape, I can put the door bars in place and make my way around the cage, welding it in. Well, we got the whole inside of the roll cage all tacked together.
And this seemed like a good time to review 8 major points when designing and building your own roll cage. First, you want to put the seat mounts into the cage. We'll be running 2 bars across the bottom when we get the seats here at the shop.
Gusset your corners for strength. Corners give way under pressure, so these will add triangulation.
You want to run a crossbar across the dash and the back side. 1 for lateral strength, and 2 to give you a place to tie your seat belts into later.
Brace the cage mounts to the frame. Remember, we still have to do that with bolts and slugs.
You're going to want to add grab bars for your passenger. The driver has a steering wheel to hold on to, and if your passenger gets their fingers between the cage bar and the roof and you roll it over, they're going to lose their fingers.
Build your cage with heavy-duty DOM tubing. Cold-rolled steel might seem cheaper, but it's not near as strong.
Keep the cage bars away from the occupants' heads. This should seem obvious.
And pad your bars for another obvious reason of comfort, because it hurts when you roll over.
And that about covers the building of a custom roll cage. As you can see, with a little bit of planning, some tools, and a lot of hard work, you too could have a custom cage like this in your truck. And
don't forget, if this seems like too much work, get a pre-bent cage. It's always another option.
Are you going to weld this up now?
Yep.
Good, I'm going to get a drink.
All right.
During the break, Jessi will finish welding in the cage. But up next, they call this the hammers for good reason. Hardcore rock crawling when Xtreme 4x4 continues. The Xtreme 4x4 Event of the Week is brought to you by Warren, #1 in winches.
I like that they've done this place. Looks good.
Oh, the cocktails. Excellent.
It's true. Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4. What we're about to show you right now is appropriately called a tease. No, not her. That! Look what we took delivery on just the other day.
And you know, I want to tell you what it is, but you're just going to have to wait and see.
I can tell you it is one awesome machine.
An awesome machine that could very well conquer a place we're about to take you. The Southern California desert and some of the most intense trails on Earth. An hour north of Palm Springs sits a collection of trails known as the Hammers.
These trails here, jackhammer, clawhammer, sledgehammer, wrecking ball, outer limits, they're not for the meager.
Hardcore, this is what rock crawling is all about. The hammer trails are appropriately named hammer.
The whole trail is tough.
I've been up to Moab, been to Rubicon, and I would say that these particular trails are relentless, non-stop. They never quit.
It's for hardcore four-wheelers that don't mind coming out and getting some body damage and aren't afraid to break.
Pretty gnarly out there.
What keeps it gnarly is the always changing Southern California terrain.
We have earthquakes out here, believe it or not, and they've moved some of these big rocks. And just recently we had flash floods, and it changed the trails completely. It's almost like they were never worked in a trail in the first place.
It's not like you just, oh, I did that. Why do it again? Because it's something different every time you come back.
It's nerve-wracking.
You get a little leg shake going on now.
Since 1991, the Victor Valley four-wheelers have invited drivers to take on the Hammers during their annual Fun in the Desert event.
People come out here and they have no idea that it's this intense. They come out here, we don't, never seen anything like this in our life. We can't do this, and they don't come prepared for it with the right equipment.
Right behind me is the only suburban rock crawler you'll ever see.
First suburban to go through here.
Don't do this at home, kids. It's like dragging an elephant up the hill.
Weight and size. Big and heavy.
Whoa! So you kind of got them so stuck. don't want to get stuck? Then the right setup is imperative.
You can't come out here with an average Jeep, just to take a Jeep and drive out here. You're not going to go nowhere. You have to have lockers and a lot of articulation, good suspension. It doesn't take a lot of horsepower, just gears and lockers and suspension to do this stuff.
Charles Dennis's 1951 Willys is more than just a pretty 4x4.
Well, when we were starting off in the morning, a couple people woke up, oh, it's too pretty to bring up here, it's going to come back dented. And we go, no, you watch, we'll come back unscathed. The body is the only thing that's stock, and that's actually a two-wheel drive car. But now the body's been dropped on a truck frame, and it's a four-wheeler now. It's got a new 350 Chevy small block engine in it. It's got a Dana 20 transfer case, Dana 44 front end, Dana 60 rear end, Detroit lockers front and rear. It has bead locks, winch, SM 420 transmission, manual. I like it instead of the automatics. The automatics are easier to drive, but kind of more fun this way. It has shackle reversal, spring over suspension in the front, spring over in the rear. There's just Rancho shocks. It's just a nice, well-built Jeep that works really good. And all the components work it's real reliable. I don't break down unless I lay it on its side, which I've done a couple times. It's just been a really good Jeep.
On the trail, his truck is a favorite.
I like it. I like it. It's nice. It's just that it's different than seeing all the other Jeeps out here. You know, it's a different model looking, but you still know it's old. It's still got the flat fenders. It's still got all the squareness to it. I like it.
For Charles, the accolades are nice, but it's the challenge of the trails that put a smile on his face.
Believe it or not, it's a relaxing hobby. I enjoy it. That's why I do it.
That sure is a pretty Willys, but man, I really like that Suburban.
Nothing beats a rock crawler you can take 15 of your friends with you.
And have room for a couple extra coolers.
That's true. And those trails are hardcore trails.
Yeah, I like how they change all the time. That's pretty neat.
That is neat.
Make sure you stay tuned, because when we come back, we got that cool little toy we're gonna show ya.
Got an idea for the show? Drop us a line at Xtreme4x4TV.com.
This is the off-road machine you've been hearing about. Rhino Off-Road Industries RTV, rough terrain vehicle. Let's bring it hard this way.
This super cool little toy is built to handle any off-road terrain, and it has some super cool engineering in it.
And we couldn't help but test it out right away in the parking lot.
You are so far from going over backwards. Okay, I'd stop there. That's going right up. This is pretty steep.
Anytime you want to go someplace that has unusual terrain, this is a great vehicle for it. We didn't start out to build a rock crawler, but with the geometry we put in this thing, it turns out to be an excellent, outstanding rock crawler. But we wanted to be able to do the desert, do the dunes, do the trails, you know, do a little bit of the mud, the snow, wherever we wanted to be. And we ended up with a platform that's actually very aggressive and very secure in all those environments.
Think they'll be upset that we took it out and roughed it up a little already?
I don't think so. They can handle it. This is a model XT1 off-road buggy from Rhino Off-Road Industries, one of 5 different kinds that they make.
And now that it's in the shop, we're going to give you a closer look at it.
It sports a Honda 4-cylinder dual overhead cam engine, making 146 horses and 135 foot-pounds of torque. It's mated to a front-wheel drive transaxle. That little motor makes excellent torque in the bottom of its RPM range, and by mounting it longitudinally in the frame with a transaxle, you don't need a transfer case. Brilliant.
Both of these axles are 9-inch Fords custom built for this buggy, with 411 gears in both the front and rear, and a spool in the rear specifically for this model. Rhino hangs their diffs off of this triangulated 4-link system and a 3-link system in the rear. Plus, this thing handles excellent thanks to these super trick sway bars and these Race Runner sway away air shocks.
The roll cage is modeled after a competition style cage, and the chassis is built with triangulation throughout the whole thing. They sent this one with an optional cargo rack.
And it's real easy to get in and out of, thanks to this quick disconnect steering wheel. And with a full suspension seat and a 5-point harness, I can wheel in this thing all day.
And who couldn't? With a 4-speed automatic transmission, a 60-mile-per-hour top speed, 14 inches of travel, 5-point racing harness, 4-wheel disc brakes, and an 84-inch wheelbase, and these Pro Comp tires give this rig excellent grip. This thing rocks.
We've still got some serious off-road time planned of our own for that RTV, as soon as we wrap up a few of the projects around here. And then we can show you exactly what that little monster can handle.
And the project at hand right now is obviously Ranger Resurrection. If you remember, we've got the cage all tacked together inside the cab, but before we finish welding that up, we want to work on the wheelbase.
Can't have a wheelbase without wheels and tires. For this truck, we chose American Racing's ATX series. It's their hardcore off-road line. These are the Mojave 20x10s. A bigger diameter is great because it doesn't limit you in brake and axle options. They're made from forged aluminum for super strength and have been coated with Teflon for easy cleanup because, well, nothing sticks to Teflon.
For tires, we went to Toyo for a set of 37x13.5 open country MTs. The nice thing about these tires, they offer a quiet ride and yet still have that aggressive attack tread. Now this exact tire is already being used by multiple SCORE racing teams, and the best thing is Toyo was one of the first manufacturers to offer a serious off-road tire for rims as big as 24 inches.
With this frame bench, all we have to do is set our wheels in place, and then we can actually adjust for our wheelbase. Okay. Keep going, stop, right? That's perfect. All right.
Looks mean.
That's gonna be one hell of a machine.
I like it.
For more information on anything you've seen today, check us out online, Xtreme4x4TV.com.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4 and our craziest build-up ever. We went ahead and set up this wheelbase so we could find clearance for our frame side mounts, just so we can tie in the entire roll cage. So as soon as I'm done with these bad boys, we can go ahead and finish the whole roll cage.
And if you remember, we're resurrecting this truck from a trashed Ranger, so that requires an entire new front end, and we're going fiberglass. So all this steel has to go.
Before I tie in the roll cage, I'll cut a gusset out of 1/8-inch plate. Welding it to the side mounts will make this a much stronger piece. Next, I'll weld on the mounting plate. Drill the mounting hole and a hole for the slug. This technique will strengthen our cage mounts rather than just welding the two tubes together. So when Ian rolls the truck over, the cage is going to want to shift. What the slug is going to do is prevent that from happening. And of course, an added bonus. We can disconnect the body from the frame whenever we need to.
Well, do you feel safe?
I feel a lot safer than the last guy who was driving this thing.
Yeah, I bet you he wished he had a cage like this. This thing is tough.
I think it's pretty unbreakable.
And that's about it. Roll Cage 101. As you can see, it's not that hard to design and build your own cage.
All you need to do is plan ahead and take your time.
Now, next time on Xtreme 4x4, we're going to start an off-road build-up on a budget.
We've all been there before. We'll see you next week.